Hello, and welcome to this in-depth, no-holds-barred interview with Thomas A. Christie, the celebrated author of a brand new book titled Digital Pioneer Spirit, the freewheeling creative innovation of Mel Croucher on the Home Microcomputer. And what a snappy little title that is. Right. My research reveals that you are, in fact, Dr. Thomas A. Christie. You are the doctor. So how do you fit in writing all your books with all that traveling through time and space?
Well, it's a difficult one because I do a lot of scarf shopping, as you can imagine, you know, and getting a fresh coat of paint on the TARDIS always takes time.
I think we have some Doctor Who references coming up later on, which we will get to. Right, you describe the subject of your book, this Mel Croucher bloke, as a revolutionary who redefined our digital age. So how come I've never heard of him? I mean, have you got any evidence that he actually exists? For example, have you ever met him?
Not in person, no, but, you know, there are so many anecdotal stories that suggest he was around. You hear about him at these ZX Spectrum micro fairs. You hear about him changing the face of UK software in the early 80s. So he must be real.
You claim that Croucher is the father of the British computer games industry, which implies he's extremely old. Do you know, in fact, is he still alive?
Well, as far as we're aware, he is, yes, because every now and again there are still, you know, sounds of new games coming out and new books arriving. So we have to assume that he's not a gigantic team of people working under a pseudonym, but he is, you know, a highly enigmatic but very real figure.
So he's not a hoax, he's not fake news, he's not AI, we think. Okay, in your previous books, very interesting and eclectic list, you examine the likes of James Bond, Mel Brooks, Liv Tyler. Can you explain their connection to Mel Croucher in terms of your subject matter?
Well, I would say they're all media figures, and the modern media age that we live in is something that has really been shaped by Mel Croucher and people like him. That's the case of, I would say, not just the multimedia world that we live in, but the transmedia approaches that we have in terms of how celebrity is communicated in the modern world, and that we see artistic works, creative works, being packaged and consumed.
Interesting your use of the word celebrity there. I see from a search on the Internet of Facts that you, Tom Christie, are in actual fact the brother of Julie Christie. So what was it like growing up with the winner of an Academy Award, a Golden Globe, and a BAFTA?
It's always the same, isn't it? I mean, every morning at breakfast, it was, you know, did you see me in Demon Seed, or, you know, Tales of Omar Sharif and Dr. Zhivago. So you learn to live with it. You know, eventually you tune it out.
So if she's won Academy Awards and BAFTAs, what have you ever won?
Well, I would say a bronze swimming certificate, but as I can't swim, that would be too bold a claim.
Okay, I think your company might have won some awards, but we'll get onto that later. Tom, may I call you Tom?
By all means, please do.
Tom, when did you first come across the work of Mel Croucher, and how did it affect you?
Well, I would say Mel Croucher is the definitive multimedia character of the 80s. Because if you were growing up in the 80s and you had an interest in computing, you couldn't not be aware of Mel Croucher and his work. I would say he was even more ubiquitous to the 80s computer scene than Max Headroom was. So this was a really interesting thing, because when other people were producing games, he was producing experiences. No one else was giving away jewel-encrusted golden sundials, for instance, as prizes for games. No one else was offering trips across to North America as a prize for winning in games. And certainly no one else was producing full interactive movies in the early 80s. This was still the stuff of science fiction. And this was the thing. It was CD-ROM games before there were CD-ROM games. You had these completely all-encompassing, curated interactive experiences being sold at a time when most of us were looking at things like Manic Miner and the Melbourne House adaptation of The Hobbit as being the acme of what was available on the spectrum. Suddenly this Deus Ex Machina comes along, it blows everyone away because it completely changes how people perceive modern computer gaming and what's available, what can be done as a result of it. So there was that.
What was Deus Ex Machina?
Well, it was this pioneering game. I say game. I mean, calling it a game is a little bit like saying that Da Vinci's work on the Mona Lisa was essentially, a series of very skillful brushstrokes, because it was more than a game. It was a story of life. It was a tale of how human life came to be, is, what the human condition is, how we live, how we perceive ourselves, which was, very, very far-reaching for a game that was able to be crammed onto 48 kilobytes of memory. I mean, when you think about it now, that's kind of the amount of space you would use for a website logo, for instance, and yet here's this entire gaming experience being crammed into that amount of memory. So it was an astonishing achievement that changed how everybody looked at interactive entertainment. So there was that aspect, but there was also the multimedia celebrity aspect. There was the live broadcasts, for instance, that he did, the recordings that appeared on computer magazines, cover mount cassette tapes, which were essentially podcasts before there were podcasts. Things like that, for instance, the appearances on TV, those kind of things that basically made this particular character stand out in ways that others didn't. I mean, this was still a period where everybody serving in W.H. Smith was still in beige Brian Nylon, and yet here's this explosion of colour and possibility into an industry that was really very much still in its infancy.
I can't help noticing your publicity photo, Tom. It shows you with facial hair. Am I correct?
That's right, yes.
Okay, well, in your book, you feature Mel Croucher's links with Groucho Marx, Salvador Dali, Frank Zappa, and the fact that they all share the same moustache. And not only that, your book includes a picture of Croucher with his collaborator, Sir Christopher Lee, and both of them are sporting moustaches, which is a ticklish subject, really. Is your book Digital Pioneer Spirit, is it moustache centric? Have you got a thing about moustaches?
I would say it's probably moustache adjacent. I think it says something about the power of facial hair to communicate complex ideas.
Okay, let's talk about the work of this so-called inspirational genius, Mel Croucher. Which of his video games or other enterprises, which has had the greatest effect on you as an individual?
I would have to say Pymania, because I was always really interested in interactive fiction and the way that people used the text adventure on the spectrum to get around the limitations of the format, because it was a system that, by all accounts, I mean, was very advanced for its day, but today, looking back, obviously, you can see the limitations of the architecture of that machine. But the interactive fiction revolution was able to bypass that because it was able to channel into prose what perhaps wouldn't be that easy to communicate visually. And Pymania just sort of threw the manual out the window. It was great because not only did you have this very complex game that was full of puns and full of really, really difficult puzzles, very obscure puzzles, but also it had this real life element as well. Again, the transmedia effect, where really, I mean, it was geocaching before there was geocaching, and a whole sort of media network grew up around it as people compared notes and tried to work out what the answer to the central puzzle was.
What machine did it run on?
Well, several. I think there was the ZX81 and the Spectrum. I think was it the Commodore 64 as well. I seem to remember the MSX had it. I may be wrong.
And how long did you waste your youth? How old were you at the time, and how long did you spend playing it?
Oh, crikey. Well, I was quite late to the Spectrum because I had an Amstrad CPC. And it was one of the posh ones, by the way, one of the ones with the colour monitor rather than the green screen one. So I must have been about 8 when I got my Sinclair Spectrum, so it must have been around then.
So you were one of the children that Croucher was accused of corrupting in the national press and even in the House of Commons, that he was pumping propaganda and all sorts of weird ideas into the minds of innocent young children at the time. That was you, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this Mel Croucher, I think he turbocharged a lot of digital creativity at a time when basically, if you were lucky, you had a BBC Micro in the corner of your classroom, and you might have done a bit of logo or something on it. So to suddenly have someone who's able to say you can turn your ideas into interactive fiction or into sort of playable entertainment by using this technology to bring your ideas to life was quite revolutionary, because it opened so many eyes to what was possible, and to the fact that this wasn't really a sort of fleeting fad, as some people thought home microcomputing would be, but actually this was the future. He was just ahead of the time.
Ahead of the time? What year would this be?
I would have said this was, for me, sort of the mid to late 80s, because even after his software company, Automata UK, had ceased business, he continued, if anything, to grow in terms of his own personal stature as an expert, but also as a media figure. And that's always what fascinated me, was the way that he perfectly straddles this boundary line between being a respected expert on one side, but being this entertaining media figure on the other, which is again why you get the Max Headroom comparison. Because again, if you were interested in computing in the 80s, you couldn't avoid Mel Croucher. He was everywhere.
Right. So he was, in fact, he was only one person. It wasn't a group of people.
It's said that he is indeed one person who managed all these different things, and that's the thing that's hard to believe, that any one person could do all of these things. That you could pioneer streaming entertainment by having radio broadcasts in the 70s for your Commodore PET. That he was able to produce the first interactive entertainment, not just for the Spectrum, but really for the world. That he was able to have, for instance, the first interactive soap opera. The first 1 million participants in his advertising campaigns. That any one person could do this makes some people think perhaps he was a consortium.
So all the innovations you're claiming that this mythical mustachioed Croucher has given the world, can you enlighten us? Can you tell us about the 17 most important ones?
Well, there are lots of competing theories out there. Some being that in actual fact he is 3 people in a long overcoat with a moustache. No one's been able to verify that. Some have said that, he operates from a hollowed out volcano somewhere, and that's why he's so difficult to track down. So there's all these different competing theories as to who Mel Croucher is and where he comes from. But what you can't deny is the impact that he's had on, not just this golden age of the home microcomputer, but moving forward into the modern age. I mean, how he's been able to take these themes from this classic era of computing and completely modernize them, so that they are relevant and they're runnable on modern technology. So there's that aspect, but there's also the aspect of the fact that he's able to take these complex themes and even turn them into children's entertainment, like Eggbirds. You may have heard this game that comes out for mobile devices, and it tells a whole story of life. And all of the important things that come along from personal development in a way that kids can understand and relate to. So he's managed to do all of those things, and yet a complete mystery.
So it sounds like he has spent a lot of his wasted a lot of his time on trying to force feed impressionable minds with his own particular proclivities and ideas. You mentioned more recent stuff like Egbert. Has he actually had? Is he still a one-man band, or has he had collaborators in these enterprises?
Oh yeah, many collaborators actually, and what's notable, of course, is the fact that he has continued to work with them for decades. People like Colin Jones, another visionary programmer, Christian Penfold, who's another huge figure in British computing, and of course even people like John Pertwee and Christopher Lee, who he has worked with, not over such a long period, but certainly to great effect and in a really memorable way. And then people like Robin Evans, who he collaborated with.
Evans, I've heard of him. He's very well known. He's a graphic artist, isn't he?
That's absolutely right, and I'm told he and Mel Croucher worked together on the longest ever running regular column on the subject of computing, which ran for decades and never missed a week. So obviously, again a collaboration which has run and run.
What was the subject of that cartoon strip?
Great moments in computing, and there have been many of them, it must be said, because he's someone who has not only gone back to people like Ada Fairfax Lovelace and Charles Babbage and all these great formative figures, but all the way back to the technologies that have underpinned what we now consider to be computer technology. So he's someone with a great mind for the history of computing and everything that's come together to make that possible.
Someone's just passed me a copy of your book, Tom. Here, it's in square page format, which is interesting. It's about the size of 45 RPM vinyl single. Remember those, popular in the 1970s and 80s? Is there it's got loads of color in it, illustrations. I hope the copyright clearance has been done on those. Is there retro symbolism going on here with the square format?
Well, I'd like to think so. I mean, I think the 80s were the absolute pinnacle of the 45, and it's sort of the final throes of its golden age. I always remember buying Tricky Disco in 1988, which went to #1, and remembering at the time thinking, this will be great for Pointless one day, because people will ask, songs that reach #1 that no one ever remembers, and Tricky Disco was right up there. So I suppose it's a tribute to that too.
According to this Croucher fellow has also released music and albums and things. Do you know any of those?
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. I think most of his back catalogue is available for people to hear online and in various different collector's editions. But everyone has their favourite. There was, obviously, Deus Ex Machina was a fully musical experience, which many people have enjoyed, not just in its original iteration, but of course in the expanded edition that came out in 2015. But everyone has
music was linked to the video games, the computer games.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was one of the first people to realise just how important music was to the overall experience, actually, because you think back to Mike Berry singing "Everyone's a Wally." I think it was about 85, and then Dodgy Geezers, the song that came out to accompany the Melbourne House game. By the time these games were doing it, Mel Croucher had been there years before. I mean, things like Pie-Mania, it wasn't just an accompaniment to the game, it was actually something that had really important clues included in it, so that you could listen to those lyrics and from there interpret part of the overall puzzle in the game. So from that point of view, I think yes, there was that creativity, there was that sense of getting music in the center stage as being a really important entertainment format, but also and again we go back to the whole multimedia approach, something that was really important as one part of a much larger whole.
So music, games, you were talking about geocaching and prizes and stuff. Anything else involved? Was there like magazines and clubs and all that sort of stuff?
Well, absolutely, because Pie-Mania really started the whole movement of computer games as a kind of social reflex, really. I mean, where so many people were getting together to talk about it. People were really enthused by this whole idea of a fictional construct that had real life applications. Something that we see more and more of now, just 40 years after the event. I think people were fascinated, of course, by the Pie Man and all of his friends like Morris, who we saw appearing in comic strips as part of the advertising that came out for Automata UK, and I think that really fascinated people. I mean, no one had ever used advertising like that before, and no one had built this whole legendarium around the mascot the way that you see with the Pie Man. And as the song tells us, don't be shy, man. Come and meet the Pie Man.
Catchy lyrics there, Tom. Catchy lyrics. It says, just looking at the cover of your book, Extremis, award-winning. Would you like to say a few words about your award-winning publishing company, Extremis?
Yeah, well, Extremis was founded almost exactly 10 years ago.
Ah.
Well, we're a book publisher who use digital techniques to get books out internationally. So that's the beauty of it from an environmental point of view. We never have to send crates of books halfway around the world because the distributor we work with, they have centres in about 87 to 90% of world territories, and they're able to print them wherever they need to be printed. So not only does it speed things up for customers, but it keeps things wherever possible as healthy as they can for the environment. So we all sorts of different topics, travel writing, pop culture, media, history, all sorts.
Awards. I see awards. I see lots of awards here. Tell me about the awards you've been awarded.
Yeah, well, there have been one or two, I'm pleased to say, starting in about 2021, Independent Publishing Company of the Year at Scotland's Prestige Awards, and that was 2021, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24. We won an Innovation and Excellence Award last year, and we've also been awarded Non-Fiction Book Publisher of the Year for Scotland, and that was at the Business Excellence Awards.
So you're Scottish, are you?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
I thought so. You're the Scottish doctor. I remember that one. Yes. Yeah. Good-looking little bloke. Yes, that's you. I can see it now in the photograph. Good heavens, Billie Piper. What was she like? Is she coming back? Is she going to be the doctor?
Well, you see, I think there was a misinterpretation there because they said they were looking for a bagpiper because of the Scottish doctor. But
we'll let that one pass. Where can our listener buy your new book, Digital Pioneer Spirit?
Well, I'm delighted to say you can buy it from any online retailer or independent bookshop. It's available to buy not just here in the UK and in Europe, but in North America, in Australia, and anywhere that good books are to be found.
Right. Okay, Tom, sorry, Doctor, what possessed you to write this book?
Well, it's an interesting one because when you look back at your writing interests, I think it's important to acknowledge people who have had an impact on your work and people who have influenced you in the years that you've been active as a writer. And I genuinely don't think anyone has had as much impact on my work as Mel Croucher has had, because it was he who redefined what was possible in terms of writing, not just creatively, but in terms of non-fiction as well. If you look at the huge amount of computer journalism that he produced, which sort of interweaves what I think is now known as narrative non-fiction, where you have that aspect of entertainment, that aspect of philosophy, things that really make you think about individual topics, which are not necessarily what you thought you were going to be thinking about when you started the article. That takes a lot of talent, but it also takes a lot of effort. And that fascinated me, the way that he's able to take something like home computing, or even the computer industry more generally. And from that, he's able to make political points, he's able to make cultural points, and all of these things are things that you didn't imagine someone writing and solely about computing would be raising, and I found that very powerful and very immediate. But also the way that he redefined what is possible in terms of transmedia. because suddenly it wasn't just about playing games. Suddenly it was about experiences. It was about what was possible using the technology of the time and how that was pointing towards new technology. So I find that very interesting, and that's something that has stayed with me actually, because I think that if there are any commonalities between extremists and the really groundbreaking work of Automata UK, I would say it is a willingness to engage with multimedia, but also a willingness to try and find new voices, and to give a voice perhaps to people who hadn't found one before, because that's been the most rewarding thing about publishing. It's been about speaking to people who said, I didn't ever imagine my book would come out, and to basically give them the assurance that not only is a book worth reading, but it's a book that will find the readership. So all of those things, when you think about it, came out of that 1980s period and the work that Mel Croucher was doing at the time.
Very interesting. He sounds a bit of a monster, really. Is he a gadfly? I mean, can he stick to one thing, jumping around all over the place, doing these? Is he still working?
Well, I would like to think so, because he's a great multidisciplinary talent, and just when you think he's conquered every subject, back he comes with something entirely new. And as you say, he's a deeply enigmatic character, someone I would love to meet one day, I must say, because the one question I would love to ask him is, back in the early 80s, when he was absolutely at the apex of his creative fame, was he thinking to himself, if everything goes well here, maybe in 40 years' time, a strange Scotsman will write a book about all this?
Well, we will never know, will we? We will never know. If he ever hears this, then perhaps he'll have the strength and courage to answer you, but maybe he will, maybe he won't. Who knows, Tom? Who knows? Do you know where if he is alive, where he would be located?
Well, do you know, that's the interesting thing, because like Banksy, he will strike in individual places. He will go and give talks. He'll be seen at public venues and then disappear back into the shadows, like the Scarlet Pimpernel. So it's very hard to say. I would say he'll always turn up where least expected.
Ah, right. Okay. Perhaps in your TARDIS. Who knows?
We can only hope.
Okay. Thomas A. Christie, celebrity author of Digital Pioneer Spirit. Thank you so much for your time.
That's great. Well, thank you very much.
And everybody, the book is available, as Tom says, all good bookshops and online. Digital Pioneer Spirit. All about this mythical Mel Croucher chap. Thank you for listening. Farewell.